So let's just talk about the system of politics, because you're an insider and an outsider. So when you were the chairman of the Republican Party, how much of the job, how much of your day-to-day was just about money? Because that's what this is really all about.
Well, okay, so let's be clear.
System.
Yeah, so let's be clear. The role of any party chairman, Democrat, Republican, county, state, national, is two things. They only have two things: raise money and win elections. If you don't do that, you're not doing your job. So your day is made up of doing those two things. That is 80% of your day on a good day, where you will spend anywhere from 2 to 4 hours dialing for dollars, which there are very few of us like doing because it's just tough to raise. Look, I'm asking you for $38,000, okay? There's a lot of presumption in that conversation.
Right.
All right? And because that's the maximum you can give.
Yeah. Do they give you a list? I mean, right when you get there first day, they're like, here's the list.
Yeah, you get
on the phone.
I was elected on a Friday, and that Monday I went up to New York and did a town hall on healthcare and the economy. And that Tuesday I was at my desk, really officially for the first time at the desk, and I did 3.5 hours worth of calls for donors. Yeah. Then what I did was, the idea was I needed to introduce myself to these folks because I'm the new kid on the block.
Right.
And, for some of them I was a little bit more of a shock than they anticipated. And so it was more introduction, but then, you kind of roll into it. And I actually had a donor cuss me out. And said, I'm so sick of the party. Every time I hear from you people is when you call asking for money. I'm not giving you another damn dime, da-da-da-da-da. And I let him vent. This brother went on for like 20 minutes. And I let him talk. And then I said, well, actually, I wasn't calling to ask for money. I was just calling to introduce myself. But
you wouldn't have said no to the money.
He wasn't giving any money.
Yeah.
So, but this was the point. And this is another important lesson of how I think you do this right. So I listened to this man because here is a longtime donor, an activist in the party, a supporter, who is now ticked off at its leadership, at the political operations, and wants no part of it. So I told him, I said, well, look, I tell you, I'm putting together a business plan, which is what I did. I put together a business, because I'm a business guy, so I put together a business plan for the party. I said, we got to raise money, and this is how we're going to spend it. These are the things that are our priorities. Mm-hmm. And I got that together over a period of time, but I told him I was doing it. I also laid out to him what I wanted to do, what my vision was. And I told, look, I don't want your money. I said, you wait and see if I do the job to your satisfaction. And if you feel like giving, give us a check. 2 weeks later, he sent a check for the maximum amount.
Really?
Because, and he told me in his note, he said, you listened to me. You took the time to listen to me. And so I thought about that. And that is a big difference. Listening to people goes so far. And so the money piece is a big part of it. Now, I believe money is property. I just generally do. That's my philosophical view. Mm-hmm. Like anything else I own, I should be free to do with it as I wish. That doesn't say there shouldn't be limitations. I sued, and this is great. Now, you'll love this. Yeah. So the RNC had a lawsuit in that I took over when I became chairman to basically peel back on McCain-Feingold, because McCain-Feingold took away from the parties the ability to raise the money, all right? And they created this system that we have. And of course, there was a companion lawsuit. Guess what it was?
Put more money in?
No. What was the companion lawsuit?
Anyone?
Supreme Court rejected my lawsuit and picked up Citizens United.
Okay,
right.
So I was sort of right. Yeah.
Right. So Citizens United was the case they decided to take over, the one that would, given the money, allowed donors to give untold sums as they used to the state parties, to the national parties and the state parties. And they decided to go down this road where you could set up these 527s, which we are now living through as a nightmare.
Yeah, so I want to get to that in just a sec, but I think everyone wants to know, how much influence does it actually get you? So someone writes a $38,000 check, or someone writes...
You get some shrimp.
Yeah, I mean, really, what do you
get
really,
some shrimp.
What do you really get?
Well, with the again, separating the party from the candidate.
Yeah.
When you write a check to the RNC, we're going to take care of you.
Right.
All right? Because that's what we do. That's what we're supposed to do.
And what does that mean? What does that mean?
When you call up and want to talk to the chairman, you get to talk to the chairman.
Yeah.
Now, you don't bring issues to me because we're political. We're not policy. So you can, and some do. I mean, I've got, buckets of ideas that people like, hey, I think we should do this. That's fine. But that's a separate way to operate. That's all political. You know it. It's what it is. We wine you, we dine you, we take you out, and we do big fundraisers. We do small fundraisers. We're in your home. All of that's part of that, and of course the access you get. So when you have convention, guess what? You're going to be taken care of because you're a major donor to the party. Yeah, you're going to be invited to the suite. You're going to get a chance to meet the candidate's the nominee's family and all of that stuff. That's what we do. There's nothing wrong with that. We've been doing that since the days of Jefferson and Washington and all those guys, all right? So that's not unusual. What's changed now is this dynamic where you have organizations that can be created that ostensibly don't talk to the candidate.
Right, which we know is complete bullshit, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Everybody, my former chief of staff is now the head of my super PAC.
Yeah.
You don't think I'm talking to this guy at some point?
Right.
All right, so we'll go with the lie. We'll go with the fiction that it doesn't happen. But what it does do is, and I have to be honest with everyone, I'm still evolving in a way on this subject because of how I view money generally. But money in politics, and I see what it is doing, is making it harder. It is becoming more of a distraction. At the end of the day, whether you're Rupert Murdoch or some other big liberal or conservative donor, you get one vote. You get one vote. You don't get 38,000 votes because you wrote a check for $38,000. So you get one vote.
But now you can put a lot of money to put a lot of ads on Fox or CNN or MSNBC that influence a lot of other people.
Well, okay, so let's talk about that. Are you really influenced by political ads?
Anyone?
Do you? Yeah. If you saw an ad tearing him down, if he's a candidate for office, and saying that he hates puppies, do you?
Not true.
Do you really? Really walk away from that ad thinking he hates puppies? Really? Do you?
My grandmother does. Willie Horton didn't work, and she votes.
That's my point.
Right.
I'm not saying it doesn't work, but what I'm saying, and Willie Horton, by the way, was originally a Democrat ad in their primary, so we won't have that conversation.
That's a whole other,
That's a whole other discussion. I know they like to put that on our doorstep, but let's go to the origins of the Willie Horton ad. But you're right. It works. So what does that say about us?
Yeah.
What does that say about you, the consumer? I just don't. My point is, this is the yin and the yang. So the political class takes advantage of it as much as they can because they know a negative ad is going to work. No matter how much you protest against it, no matter how much you hate it, you're going to sit there like this. Wow, did you see? And then did you see that? And now today you're going to tweet about it and you're going to send it out. So they know that. They play to that. And that's part of the problem. And the money does that. What I tried to do as chairman, and we were moderately successful in the last cycle in 2012, but we set it up in my term in 2009 and 10, was I saw down the road that money was going to be an issue, particularly after the Supreme Court rejected my case and took Citizens United. So we wanted to design a system so that you could actually participate without necessarily having to have a lot of money. And we saw that with Newt Gingrich, Rick Santorum, and a number of candidates in the 2012 cycle who didn't have Mitt Romney's bankroll. But because of the way the system was designed, they had time to get their idea out there. And those ideas began to resonate. And that's when the money came to them after the fact. So there is this dynamic that you can play around with. Right now, I will argue and agree with you, it's distorted. Yeah. And there needs to be a reassessment of how we use money in politics. And right now, I think it's used poorly because it's just way too much of it.
Yeah, so last question about money. Do you think both parties treat it the same? I think there's a sense and this may be just a meme that's out there. Yeah, that that the Koch brothers run the Republican Party. There's more of like there's these evil Mr. Burns guys that are running the party more than say the Democrats. I'm a firm believer that it's equal.
How much money did Hollywood? How much money did the unions? How much money did individual wealthy donors give Barack Obama? Barack Obama, who as a U.S. Senator was up on the Senate floor beating the hell out of Republicans over campaign finance reform, talking all this smack about, take the public money, until he got a big ass check. And then all of a sudden, when it came time to make that decision, what did his campaign decide to do? They didn't take public money in 2008 like McCain did.
Right.
What did they do?
They
took all the super PAC money, even though they weren't super PACs.
Right.
They took all that money out of Hollywood. They took all that money off of Wall Street. So don't talk to me about money in the Republican Party.
Yeah, no, listen, I'm a
talk
believer.
about money in the political system. That's the reality, because both sides love it. Both sides suck at that teat every single day, politically, and maybe otherwise. and that's the reality that we're now having to live with. So, talk about big money. It's just now manifesting itself in a different form, because for 40 years, when the unions and Hollywood were backing Democrats, Republicans weren't. I mean, we didn't have all these big players the way we do now. We didn't have the Koch brothers back in Ronald Reagan's day or in the 1970s. So the dynamic has changed a little bit. Well, it's actually changed a lot. But the thread, the meme, is the same.
Yeah.
And that is, money still plays a role in politics. The question that we need to ask ourselves, again, in setting up our scales of priorities, is how do we prioritize its role? Because if you're going to go to a public financing system, then you need to account for races that are in markets like this market here in LA that is damned expensive, versus a market in Utah or a market in southwest corner of South Carolina.
Is this an example where Obama really has dropped the ball? Because even just yesterday, he went to Oregon, where the shooting was a couple days ago. And do you guys know where he went right after that? He went to a fundraiser. He
does that all the time.
But I mean, think about that.
It's like almost after every national tragedy, he goes to a fundraiser. I don't know who's scheduling this guy.
So this is a second-term president with only a year left, who, after this horrific tragedy,
I don't know who he's raising money. Who's he raising money for?
I guess for the party, right?
Debbie says they're broke, so I don't know.
But doesn't that isn't that the most emblematic thing of what's going on here? That even a two-term president on his way out goes to a tragedy, and then at the end of the day, his day was spent raising money, and not even for himself.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is something that really sticks in the craw of a lot of people, and I can tell you, as many conservatives and libertarians are as annoyed about that as are liberals and progressives. Yeah. And so it is an American phenomenon that we invest so much of our politics in having money to do politics. Yeah. When you look at the way politics is executed around the globe, they don't come anywhere near what we spend to elect someone to office. You think about how much money a candidate running for, I was with a candidate yesterday in New Hampshire, looking at a congressional race, asked him how much it's going to run, how much it's going to cost him in New Hampshire for congressional, $2 million.
In New Hampshire?
In New Hampshire.
Yeah.
For a job that pays $178,000 a year. When I ran for the U.S. Senate in 2006, my race was the most expensive race in the state of Maryland up to that point. For federal office, and I raised $10 million for a U.S. Senate race. Today, for 2016, that race is now about a $15 to $20 million race. Why?
Crazy.
Why? And no one stops to ask the question, to answer the question, why? Why is it that expensive?
Well, I think these guys ask it.
Well, they do, right? And they're right to, and they need to continue to ask it, because it is having, I think, a very downward, depressive effect on our politics. It brings out the cynicism in all of us, because you just see a very small group of people who are getting to play. and you're the one paying the taxes. You're the one trying to make it from paycheck to paycheck. You're the one who's trying to deal with all this crap that spews out of state capitals and federal government. And you just feel that your access is somehow limited and cut off. And no American should feel that way, in my view.
Yeah. All right. Enough about money.
Money.
It's important. It's important, but and we could talk about it forever.
It is important. It is important, but it's one of those things. You tell me how you get it out of the game.
Yeah.
How do you get it out of the game at this point? Because
I don't know. That's why I have
under
you
the
here.
current rules, because as long as you've got a Citizens United out there, where you and you can get together and decide we're going to form a PAC. And it may not be for candidate A or for candidate B. You just want to form a PAC and you just want to play. And you're going to go to the rest of the universe and you can now raise untold millions of dollars. And we don't need to know who any one of you are. You can stroke a check for $10 million right now and your name will never show up on any report in Washington. Do we really want that system? I believe again, going back to and we can then move on.
Yep. Going
back to my central argument, money is property. So I can do with my property whatever I want, right? So if I want to write your campaign a $10 million check, I should be allowed to do it. But here's the caveat. Here's the catch. The day I write it, the next morning, the next hour, the next minute, it is fully disclosed, period. My name, what I do, the amount, the nature of my business, so that everyone in the universe knows who's giving to you. And then that puts the onus on you, the politician. Because if you want to be associated with my money and all that comes with it, guess what? You'll take it. But if you don't, guess what? You won't. And that will have a chilling effect, because right now, if you don't know that I'm doing something that, harms the environment or otherwise is, a negative, for example, no one in the universe will ever know it, except you when you write the check. When you get the check.
I'm pretty sure the politicians like the plausible deniability.
Of course
on
they
that.
do.
Yeah. So, all right. So moving away from money. So I want to talk about foreign policy a little bit, because to me, it should be a Republican. This should be a go-to Republican issue, and we're in a freaking mess right now. I mean, I don't think the American public really realizes what
why should it be a go-to
disaster.
Republican issue?
Well, that they're strong.
The executive branch sets the foreign policy. So why is this a
sure? But there's the idea that Republicans are stronger in foreign policy,
yeah,
and we have such a meltdown right now in the Middle East.
We gave that up a while ago.
Yeah, well, clearly.
we gave that position up a while ago when we started making some really boneheaded decisions about how we engage.
Right. So Iraq, I think, is boneheaded. Right. So
I mean, it's just a bad policy. You don't do nation building. No superpower since time began has been successful at nation building.
Yeah.
It always collapses. At some point, it falls down around your feet.
So where do you fall then on everything that's going on in the Middle East? We tried to nation build, right? We know we went to the wrong war for the wrong reasons. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
By your estimation,
I agree. Yeah.
And now, because of that, Iraq, but especially Syria, they're not functioning states in any way that we define a state.
You look at it in two parts. And the first part, we all know the history. We all know how we got here. All right, so that's stipulated. We all know how we got here. And I think generally everyone, including candidates now running for president on the GOP side, some begrudgingly, some less so, admit that we got here the wrong way. All right, so we're in a bad space for the wrong reasons. All right, so now the test of this time is, how do we go forward? And what do we learn from the mistake? And then how do we not make it again? But more importantly, how do we position the United States vis-a-vis our allies, like Israel and Saudi Arabia, who represent two opposing problems for the U.S.
Right.
And our enemies, like Iran, which I really don't even want to use that term because that's a little strong.
Yeah.
That's a little strong because it's not. I don't think it's there. I don't think it's that kind of relationship.
Didn't we just give them $150 billion?
Thank you.
If we're enemies,
I'm just saying. I don't think it's that kind of relationship.
Yeah.
And the strategic relationship we need to have with Russia and China, who are big players in the Middle East, but so are the French.
Yeah.
So are the Brits. So
where does that leave us as a nation? Because it seems to me we go in, we try something, we always screw it up, and now we leave and we see what that does. I mean, it's a real mess there, and we created it. So I feel like there's a guilt sort of associated with Americans. We feel like we have to do something, and yet we know no matter what we do, we somehow make it worse. And now Russia's jumping in and reasserting themselves.
And we can argue the point, but I think there are enough examples of either hesitation by this administration, the Obama administration, reticence, or even just a lack of unawareness, which they even alluded to just recently about the maneuvers of Russia. When you have State Department officials off the record saying, we just didn't see this coming. Well, dude, that's why you're there. You're supposed to see this coming. Or
they called them JV, right? They called ISIS JV only a year ago.
But let me tell you what I think this goes back to. This goes back to, believe it or not, to the 1970s, in my view, when the Church Committee and the Carter administration sort of came to this conclusion that our intelligence organizations were somehow bad. Now CIA and all those guys, they had their fingers in some crazy pots and doing some crazy things. We got that. But I think what we have seen over time, whether it's Iran-Contra, whether it is what we're seeing right now in the Middle East, is a lack of intelligence on the ground, a lack of ability to actually know what the hell is going on. And I don't just mean know who the bad players are, but know what nook and cranny they're in. Know what their favorite cafe is. Know what their favorite coffee or latte is. Know who their kids, I mean, just that level of detail that was so much a part of the Cold War in terms of how the U.S. and Russia sort of worked off of each other and knew what was going on. And they were so effective at it that they created effectively a stalemate.
Yeah. So whose fault is that we don't have that?
Oh, I think it's a combination of political leadership that sort of overreacted to bad things that some of these institutions get into and do. Government is about overreaction. It's about reaction. It's not a proactive entity. They just don't. You think they sit around and say, "So listen, how do we actually solve a problem before it starts?" That's not what they do.
Yeah.
So a Newtown happens, a Columbine happens, a Freddie Gray happens. These things happen, and then the government wants to go, well, we're going to come here, we're going to fix this for you. Don't worry, we got this. No, just step out. Yeah. Just let the people on the ground deal with it. So there's a little bit of that where they overreact, and they overreact in a way in which they actually wind up making it worse. And in the process of overreacting, they begin to penalize the players in a way that prevents them from doing anything constructive later on.
Yeah.
Because now we're going to cut your funding for this, we're going to bring you in for all these here. If they just did day to day, week to week, month to month oversight, they have committees called Oversight.
Yeah.
Do they meet? Do they actually do oversight?
Right, who's oversighting
Who's
those
overseeing?
guys? Yeah.
If you're doing this on an ongoing basis, and you're supporting and guiding those intelligence organizations, a lot of the stuff that we've gotten ourselves into over the last 15, 20 years, some of that could have been avoided because we would have had the intelligence to know. I mean, look at it this way. How many times have we seen in the political process when you don't have the count right on something, or you've misidentified something, or you misbrand? That's okay. There are no consequences from that. All right, so the speaker didn't get that vote because the whip didn't count it right. Okay,
Right.
We got that. But when you're out in the field, when you're in a situation like Benghazi, for example, where you have cables from the people in the field saying, we need this support, and the folks in Washington want to have a meeting about it, that's where the things begin to break down. And so this idea of having an ongoing, accountable oversight process in which you are in the moment, real time, with what's going on, I think begins to alleviate the pressure on the executive branch and even the Congress to put itself in a position where, we're talking about sending in troops and, ratcheting up all this spending on in reaction to something that someone else has done. I think that's a step. Now,
So we're always playing catch up, I think.
We're playing catch up, and it's more complicated, I know, and there's a lot more to it. But it's, I tell you, I've learned over the years in Washington and watching some of these guys, it's always the simple stuff. It's the things that you don't think are important, or the things that you just kind of go, well, why would we do that? That's the thing you should do to avoid a bigger problem later on.